In this episode, we discuss whether Jesus felt actual physical pain, emotional pain, or no pain at all. We then consider whether Satan can affect physical things or not. That ties into our bigger question of why do bad things happen to good people, and what are God and Satan's roles in that. Enjoy! You're listening to Campfire Theology, where we explore topics you usually wouldn't discuss in church. So gather around with us, because we believe the conversation itself is holy.
Jesus came to earth. Did he experience humanity in the same way that we do? In the same that we do or did, or did his divinity make his experience here different or easier?
Correct.
Did he experience pain on the cross, or did he just kind of like turn the pain receptors off because he's got to do that?
Well, we know it was pain,
Okay.
but
And I'm just saying that one.
correct. But do we know that?
Do we know that it was pain?
Yeah, I mean, he bled, he cried, he said, he literally said, my God, why have you forsaken me? If that's not pain, what is? Right?
Sure.
So is that an emotional or physical pain?
Both.
Well,
So,
I think you can assume it was physical pain. Right.
well, you can assume, when he's
Taking
bleeding, that's
a
physical.
spear to the chest.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt of the physical when they said they're mopping up his blood and everything, but they're breaking his bones on the cross and everything else that they did.
Actually, it didn't break his bones.
Yeah,
Actually.
it actually.
They
normally break the bones. They usually normally break.
You're right. Okay, yeah. But what I was thinking of is the nails. I mean, you're assuming they didn't pierce any bone. Maybe they didn't.
Well, they didn't because that was the fulfillment of prophecy.
Correct. Right. Is no broken bones. Yeah, I know. Okay.
So you're wrong.
No. And that's an episode.
Exactly. What are you saying though, Dave? It's going to be a great point.
How David is wrong episode.
Right. The physical pain piece, I think, is an interesting question. And how do we know it was really pain, or was he putting on some sort of act? I think that is an interesting thought, because
Is that really a question?
Like, how do we really know anybody else besides ourselves is experiencing anything?
Yeah.
With, you know what I mean? I think that pulls into question everything.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a reality bending kind of thing.
Wait, so I think that you can assume that he experiences the same pain that we do.
And the Bible said he did.
Right.
So
And I mentioned a couple examples earlier, like where he had the anxiety of being crucified when he was sweating blood
Right.
in the garden while he was praying. He was basically begging God, like, "Hey, change your mind, please. If this is your will, I'll do it, but I really don't want to do it."
Right. Yep.
And so we know that he was feeling the human emotions of, anguish, looking forward, knowing what was coming. We know that he cried, right? We know that he wept and that he was sad, and he experienced the same emotions that we feel.
Yes.
It's very reasonable to assume that he, like all of us, experienced the physical pain of being flogged and having nails driven through your hands and the agony of a crucifixion.
Right. So I think the question that you're saying here is, was Jesus able to almost fake his pain,
No.
emotional and or physical, because there is precedence for that for people to do that. So, for example, some autistic people will simply mimic what they see others doing in social situations because they don't have the same social understanding as other people.
Sure.
And so when I would have autistic students, I would observe this, where they would look around and see other people laughing.
Yeah.
Therefore, they would laugh because they assume that's how they are going to fit in societally.
I don't even think it's just autistic people. A lot of everybody does.
Sure.
It's just
Yeah,
social cue.
sure, exactly.
But is pain one of those things? Is that a separate kind of emotion, or a feeling? Maybe not emotion, but a feeling that we have because of the receptors in our brain. It's more instinctual. We know when something hurts, kind of idea, because of our nerve endings and things like
I think that God, or when Jesus came, he was holy man, fully man, I think is what it talked about.
Yeah.
In the scripture, and I think that is presumptive that he could feel pain, and he had the same nerve endings and pain receptors and everything that we experience.
Yeah.
There's really no examples outside of like a medical anomaly where people don't feel pain.
Right.
I think it's really, really rare. Sometimes there is such a medical
Pain itself is weird, isn't it? It's like we associate pain. Speaking of why do bad things happen to good people or evil, we typically associate something being painful as bad,
Right.
and yet the creation of pain is incredibly
good,
powerful, and good,
right?
Because I think it's Tony Dungy, I believe, had adopted a son, and his son had a rare condition where he couldn't feel pain, and he would talk about
he could be on fire.
Horrible. Exactly. He said he would go into the oven, he would open the oven, and he would take out a hot pan, and he couldn't feel that, and he wouldn't realize that his hands were burning, and he was getting injured. So the idea of pain is to say, hey, something isn't right.
Yep.
And you need to do something
it's a course correction.
To fix it.
Correct.
It's a what?
A course correction.
Right.
So I've heard a lot of times that God whispers to us like in prayers and things, and he shouts to us in pain.
Yeah.
Right. That's one thing is a lot of times it's like,
nope, I don't think it is.
No, if I quote it, I'll think it is.
It sounds too quippy to be.
Honestly,
this stuff is
heard it, but I hate saying that. I'll get made fun of.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know you read it.
Rick, you weren't doubt. You word that one.
But it's completely true, right? There's like so many times where we know God is tugging at us and we just ignore it.
Yeah.
Until we finally like get hurt or something happens, and then it's like, then we're like, okay, God, now I'm listening. Like, and it's sad, but it's our choosing a lot of times.
It is.
Well, it gets back to like, why do bad things happen? First of all, you don't get to understand all that.
Yeah.
And second of all, like, sometimes that's the way God that's giving you something that is bad and painful in the moment to avoid something way more painful.
Correct.
Right? And that's the same way we correct our children. Right?
Yep.
Sometimes we spank them physically. We'll spank their butt when they're being poorly behaved because we know that if that behavior continues into adulthood, the pain and emotional anguish that they're going to experience throughout their lives as adults because of that behavior is going to be far worse than the pain of getting a temporary spanking.
Well, maybe
right?
that spanking or discipline prevents your child from going on the road to get run over by a car.
Yeah, exactly. Or drowned.
Exactly.
Or
right?
just like that. Maybe your child is really defiant and they don't want to behave, right?
Yeah.
So you have to give them a spanking, or you have to put them in timeout. Like, nobody wants that kind of discipline. But if you don't get it and you grow into adulthood, what does that look like down the road? Well, maybe you're just defiant and you end up in jail, or you end up killing someone else, or really injuring yourself, or doing other things that are much far greater than the pain of getting your butt paddled when you're 4.
I have really good news. Josh is wrong. C.S. Lewis says, pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. That's a really good quote.
That is, but the way you said it wasn't the correct.
So it's David's fault. I agree.
It is David's fault.
David, you read it.
We're wrong.
I love that you said we have really good news. Josh is wrong.
I like that the point of this podcast is to try to criticize the other for
right. Exactly. That's just.
I think that's really accurately quote Rick Warren.
I do think that. I do
Or
think that's
Trump.
something that our listeners can enjoy.
I think it's an awesome quote though. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world,
which is true.
Which is literally what happens in our world. Yes.
Exactly.
So to that point though, and we keep circling back to this. We had a really good segment on why bad things happen to good people.
Right. It's like an Easter egg episode.
Coming to
But there's to that point. So it all honestly it all relates back to that. The question then to me always comes back on is if you don't think bad things should happen to good people, right? You're like, well, I'm good, so bad things shouldn't happen to me. If that's the way you believe God is, you are now turning God into a works-based faith, because you're saying that everything I do is good, so I should get
Right.
good. And again, so you're, which God has completely contradicted all of that, but it's literally like us getting back to, oh no, hey God, I'm good. Nothing bad should ever happen to me.
I almost feel like the idea of I'm good is in itself sinful and kind of to your
100% agree.
right.
Yeah,
Like to be so prideful to think I'm good, I don't deserve this is sinful. Like
exactly right.
sinfully prideful, I guess, because if we get what we deserve to be in hell right now, burning eternally.
Yeah,
that's what we deserve. We're born into sin. Most of us probably sin more than we do any good in an average day, even if it's just in our thoughts, right? So that's where we need God's grace, and forgiveness, and that's why there's such a void. And I feel like when people don't have that, they just have this gnawing, and they're just always looking for this something to help them feel joy. And so most people try to fill that with happiness, things that make them happy, money, women, pleasure of the flesh.
Absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of that David Jeremiah book that we read together. What was the name of that book?
Agents of the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a really convicting chapter. I think we all kind of felt like terrible, where God is talking to a guy, and he is sort of at the white throne judgment. And the guy is trying to explain, like, well, I didn't really do things that bad.
Yeah.
Can't you let me in, sort of, to heaven, because I didn't do things that bad? And God said, okay, so let's take a look at if I was to let you into heaven based on your works and and your thoughts, would you actually get in? And it was sort of like revealed in the conversation that the dude like fell short of God's glory so many times and had sinned so many times.
I think an example is like he was so proud that he gave money to his church.
Right.
But he only gave money in his thought, or one of the reasons for intentions of that was he gave money in his church because he knew people were looking or would know about it.
Right.
So like God was able to weigh his heart, say, yeah, you did a good thing, but you had the wrong intentions. Exactly. And how many times do we do that all the time? So to say like, why do bad things happen to good people? It's like there is no such thing as a good person. Like we're flawed from the beginning, from the time that we fell in the Garden of Eden. We are born into sin, and we are inherently bad. Like we are inherently full of sin. So there's only one way to remedy that, and that's through Christ. And that's why he had to come and be crucified on our behalf.
Right. So then if the follow-up question to that is, if you then become a Christian and do the Romans 10:9 and 10 thing and confess with your mouth and believe in your heart, those things, then after that point, why do bad things happen to Christians? I think is a good question. Like, why would God allow us who have come to realization that we need Jesus to experience something that seemingly is undeserved? I think by your point where you're saying, well, is that like essentially all the bad things that happen to us are deserved things? Like, we kind of do deserve that. Like, because of the sinfulness that we have done, and even in our thoughts. I mean, Jesus had said, if you even think about, committing adultery with somebody, that you are basically already done it. Yeah.
In your heart. Yeah. So what we deserve, every one of us who have had lust in our heart, every single one of us, every man alive and woman really, have experienced that emotion of like lusting after another human who isn't our spouse.
Right.
So God defines that, says you've already committed adultery in your heart. Well, what we deserve for adultery is divorce, lose your kids, lose your house, lose all, lose everything that matters to you. Like, that's what you deserve. So when people are like, how come I don't get what I deserve? It's like, you be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Is how I feel, because
exactly,
if you want what you deserve, you'll get what you deserve, and what you deserve is hell.
Well, and my grace is sufficient for you, right? So like realistically, we're getting grace that we deserve, and enough to. And again, this is a character building time here on earth, not a comfort.
Right. So is that why God continues to allow things to happen to us, those of us that choose to believe in Jesus?
But again,
But-
it's the freedom of choice. It's the consequences. It's a broken world. This isn't the way he designed the world. This is us living in a broken world. It's not him causing things to happen.
Right.
It's
Agreed.
him
Allowing?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately he allows everything, right? I mean, he has a power to stop anything he wants, right? So
Right.
I believe he is allowing it, but I don't think he causes any evil. But he can turn the good out of it. So again, it's the worst things that we can imagine are, because I've always found it interesting, like the devil, when he does something, all he does is corrupt something.
Right.
Right, and it's not hard to do. Like to take something and you take something good and turn it into bad, or
Right.
your example about the kids show, and then all of a sudden some pedophiles using that for like
Right.
you can literally corrupt anything. There's no skill in that, in all honesty.
Exactly.
But for God, they say like the greatest thing is where He's taking the most evil, horrendous acts, and He can take good out of that. That's a true miracle.
Right. That is.
Right.
It
Like
is a miracle.
Like for anybody can corrupt anything. That's not like when the devil does that. There's times in the past where I'm like, oh wow, great job. Like you think you're so big, like who couldn't have done that, right? Like,
Sure.
But the fact that God can take what you're doing and turn good out of that, like that's something you can't do.
Exactly.
So do you think Satan can only corrupt what God creates, or can Satan create
That's a
bad things or evil?
I don't think.
I think
I don't think he
corrupts
can
what
create.
God creates.
Okay,
agree.
so like if you go back to the Garden of Eden, God created the Garden of Eden,
Yep.
Right.
except for one tree.
Yep.
Did God create that tree, or is that Satan's creation, or did God create it, giving Satan just this sliver of hope that he could corrupt that enough, and then by default, then corrupt us, so that way Satan starts to have a foothold in our lives, and thus diverge our path into humanity, into where we are today?
Right.
Or did God allow Satan to create that tree and basically say, hey,
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he created it, but ultimately it doesn't matter, because if he created the tree or he let Satan create the tree, ultimately he's still in control, and he's the one in power. Satan's only tool was, oh, did God tell you this? No. Actually, you're going to gain wisdom, and he just doesn't want you to be like him. Like all Satan can do is put a spin on everything,
Right.
for evil, right? Like there's zero skill in my, not that it's not skillful, but it's just not. There's no creativity. There's no anything. It's just, he's the father of lies. Everything he says it's just, there's nothing special about it when you think about it. It's amazing what God can truly do. And the fact that he can you're talking about like, what if 1 million people died in a war in Ukraine? Like, maybe we'll never know, and we won't until we get to heaven. But we'll also never know how many, maybe millions more throughout history or the future of lives were changed or improved or impacted or saved or anything because of that.
Right.
And like, that's what's incredible is just.
I'll disagree in a sense that I do think it's incredibly skillful.
I do.
That Satan, I think, is
And that's not what I
master
mean.
of the lies.
He is skillful.
No, you're wrong. You're just dumb. So
No, actually, if you go back to audio, I already corrected myself and said it is skillful.
I edited that out.
Kyle's acting like Satan right now.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You
No, but speaking of, so here's a question for you then. Do you guys
hurting it?
And some people probably give too much credit to this. I'm not one of those people, but
Right.
Tonight we had a very good discussion.
Yeah.
We were doing a good Christian thing.
And your battery.
You think Satan allows the audio to go out, so we almost have to scrap that whole section? Do you guys believe that, or is that kind of like, nah, that's just something?
I do. So I actually,
that's a good
prayer.
question.
I had this prayer ahead of time. I know. So in my opinion, Satan, when bad things happen to Christians, to go back to Josh's question here, Satan wants to attack or wants to go more strongly after Christians or people that are trying to follow Christ, because he already has everybody else.
Right.
So where is he going to focus his efforts on?
Exactly.
It's going to be in the parts that he doesn't own, that he doesn't possess, because That's what he wants. Is he wants the whole world. He wants everything and every person in it. So he's going to come after. He's going to try and disrupt a podcast. He's going to try and disrupt our lives more, in my opinion. That's where, if we put on the cloak of armor, that's where we have to stand guard and we have to continually fight back, because I think there's the spiritual warfare is incredibly real.
Right.
And you know, like in Screw Tape Letters with C.S. Lewis, if you ever read that, that's incredibly evident that demons want to go after Christians or somebody who's living a godly life, because they want to break that up and pull you away.
Yeah.
Well, you're a teacher in your classroom.
So I'm always right. Yeah.
That's part
The kids who are already on board, who are doing their stuff or whatever, versus the kid who's struggling and behind, which one do you spend more time with? Right? You're always focused on the one that's behind. Same thing with us, right? Like if we're... Actually, no, that'd be complete opposite.
I was going to say.
No, what you're saying is right. Where Satan feels like he's behind because, hey, I'm starting
From his perspective,
right? Because he's following God, and he's
The one's already on board.
he's already starting to consider, following Jesus. I've got to really spend extra effort here. I've got to make everything, everything difficult for him. So the question, going back to did Satan interrupt the audio? I don't know. Can Satan do stuff like that? Or does he only have the power to interrupt our emotions and our our intrapersonal stuff, not
physical thing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
I think he can do both. In my opinion,
I think so too.
If he can mess with our emotions, why couldn't he mess with a microphone?
Sure.
It would, to me, the opposite would seem harder to believe, that he couldn't mess with us, but he could mess with something physical in this world.
Sure. I kind of feel like I don't think he can mess with physical things in the world. It would be my...
He can't manipulate anything or move anything.
I don't think he can cause a car crash. You know what I mean? I think he can manipulate our emotions and how we react to that crash.
So then the opposite. So then can God prevent a car crash?
Yes.
I think God can. I think God can do anything. I think Satan is maybe limited to manipulating emotions and soul, and more like a spiritual level and less of a physical level.
Would you equate that then to a demonic possession, where he goes into a body, or a demon goes into a body, and that starts moving stuff and attacking and doing things? Would you equate that, or is that different?
Yeah, no, I think that's probably how I would feel.
More emotional change.
Yeah,
causing that person to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like Christ, the devil, either possesses somebody or causes someone to feel so much anger and rage that they go shoot up a school.
It's not going to be like a plate that goes flying across to a wall.
Yeah, I don't think that he can cause the school to burn down. I don't think Satan's I'm going to start an electrical fire and burn down a school and kill 10 kids.
Yeah.
I feel like he's more no, I'm going to torment somebody's soul so much that they go in on my behalf.
Correct.
And kill 10 kids. Gun or a knife or whatever, right? I feel like he can't operate in the physical. So, and maybe that's one of his disadvantages. I could be wrong.
I've always viewed Satan and demons then. I think there is a distinction.
Yes.
And I view Satan and his demons as having a limited power. They do have a ton of power and resources, but they are not omnipotent like God is.
Right.
So God has the entire world and has everything under his umbrella. However, Satan and his demons, it's almost like they can go out to work and they have to choose where to spend their time and their energy, because it's limited. They can't if they were omnipotent, then they could simply change everything and they would be on par with God. So to me, there is this battle waging where if we are in Christ and we're constantly in Christ, if our armor is so strong that we can continue to push back Satan, and we make that stronger and stronger, then it makes it harder and harder for him to interfere, for him to interrupt us and interrupt our emotions in our lives. And I think that's when the more you fill yourself up with Christ, the harder that becomes.
Agreed.
It's easier when, conversely, somebody doesn't know Christ and they're open to anything.
Yeah.
And then they're open to Satan, and then it's like, oh, this is an easy target.
Right.
Let me hop in here, and then it's easier for them to build within that person, conversely.